Oh, hello everyone. Um, Welcome to the YA Contemporary panel. As I said in my I didn't really know how to do a subtitle for it. So Perfect Summer Reads is my subtitle for this
That's fun.
panel. I really love contemporary reads during the summer. So I love just hosting them basically in the summertime. Whenever summer starts for everyone else. I don't know when summer is for other people's definitions. Um, I'm just going to say a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to let the lovely authors that I'm moderating or that I have the pleasure of moderating for today intro themselves and talk about their books. And then we're going to go on to my questions. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, and I will remember to scroll back when it comes time to answer them. If you don't know who I am, my name's Lily. I'm the moderator behind this panel, and just like the person behind Utopia State of Mind. And so now I would love for the authors to introduce themselves and tell us about what their book is about. Amico, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Emiko Jean, and I am a writer of young adult and adult fiction. And I'm here to talk about Tokyo Ever After and Tokyo Dreaming, which is all about a Japanese American teen who finds out she is the long lost daughter of the Crown Prince of Japan. So it's kind of like the Princess Diaries meets Crazy Rich Asians.
Hello, I'm Raquel Marie. I am the author of You Don't Have a Shot. I luckily stole this copy from my father because I did not bring my own to the panel. It is a YA contemporary romance about Valentina, who is a soccer star who is very anxious and has invested a lot of her energy and self-worth into being the perfect soccer player, who then has to team up with her longtime rival, Leticia, to co-captain an inexperienced soccer team at the camp that they grew up at in order to ensure their futures. So it is a sapphic rivals to lovers soccer romance, and I've not perfected the pitch super well. So every time I say it, I'm just hoping I don't start pitching my first book on accident.
Tashi, do you want to tell us about yourself and your book? Wait, you're muted.
That's on me. Hi, I'm Tashi. I'm the author of A Show for Two. I'm also having technical difficulties, so ignore that. But A Show for Two is inspired by when I was in high school, my senior year of high school. Tom Holland went undercover as a student, and it was insane. And so I thought it would be cool to write a book where a celebrity goes undercover, and in the book, an aspiring screenwriter falls in love with him, and they explore New York City together. And it's a love letter to New York City, and it's a celebrity love interest, and it's super fun in my opinion.
Hi, I'm Gloria Chao, and I'm the author of American Panda, Our Wayward Fate, Rent a Boyfriend, and When You Wish Upon a Lantern, which is my latest that came out in February. And this one takes place in Chicago's Chinatown, and it's about a girl whose family owns a wishing lantern shop. And when she finds out that it's struggling, she teams up with the boy from the Mooncake Bakery next door to make the wishes come true for the customers in secret.
So, the first question that I would love to ask is kind of a general one about the genre, the theme of our panel, but it's what draws you, what drew you initially to the contemporary genre, but also what keeps you coming back to the contemporary genre, and also the YA, YA age group. Raquel, do you want to start?
Sure. For me, I think the reason that I really love contemporary, especially in the YA category, is that growing up, I was someone who had very intense emotions and when you have issues, kind of romanticizing them as a young person. And when I would read YA contemporaries that were about teenagers dealing with everyday problems and complications, there's a sort of validity that the genre provides to teenagers and saying the things that you are going through are worth a story. It's worth talking about. It's worth exploring thematically. And so it was a comfort to me. And I also think the teenage years are just so rife with really intense emotions and change, and everything feels like both the end of the world and the beginning of the world. So it's this really nice canvas to get to play around with a lot of different themes about like growing up and coming of age and just interpersonal conflict, because everything feels very high stakes, even in like the everyday realistic fiction genre of contemporary. So I feel like I keep coming back to it because it's just really fun to get to play around with that kind of stuff here.
Yeah, I feel like the reason like I'm so drawn to YA is like because I feel like I'm always writing for the younger version of myself. And like she didn't have books where like characters look like me, talk like me, experience things like me. And like I know I would have killed to like have read books like the ones I'm writing now. So I feel like it's like to heal the inner child in me. And also because I love like the genre, like I feel like it really ignited my love for reading and made me the author I am. So I feel like it's just something that my heart always goes back to.
Yeah, for me, I keep coming back to YA contemporary, both as a reader and a writer. It's my favorite genre and age category. And I think part of that is, you know, when I first became a writer, I was going through a really tough time. I had switched careers. I wasn't really sure if this was the right path. And so just this question of, you know, who am I? You know, what's next for me was so salient for me. And you know, it's the most salient for a young adult. You know, that's the time when you're going through that the most. And I wanted to explore this question, and it felt like the most appropriate time was to do it in YA. And I also feel like YA gives you a little bit of freedom that you don't have in other places. Like you can be a little bit more honest. You have a little bit of a broader range of things that you can explore. So I always come back to it because, you know, it's just my favorite.
I echo all of those sentiments. I think there's something really perennial about YA contemporary. And I've always really loved reading and also writing like coming of age stories. And I feel like you don't come of age like once in your lifetime, like this happens over and over again. And I think that's why I keep returning to YA contemporary, is because it's cyclic. And I have these cycles where I go through and I look back and I change. And, you know, young adult literature is so like ripe with all of those experiences, and you get to explore them over and over again. And it's so nuanced. And I enjoy reading YA contemporary too. It's where I, like Gloria was saying, it's what I always come back to as well.
Yeah, I think something that was interesting that we just that we discussed in the last panel like an hour ago was this idea that also in YA, it's this weird like time as well where so many things seem like they're under your control. You have so much more agency, but also at a time as well when you realize that that's not actually necessarily 100% true. There's a lot of baggage and like a lot of weight associated with these choices that you have. You know, there's this rhetoric that like, oh, you can choose your future, but like, you know, asterisk, like, you know, certain futures, certain decisions, whatever. So I love asking what draws people like to that specific time period. Speak kind of a little bit related to that and a little bit related to what Tashi was saying. When you envisioned your main character, what was the first image or idea of your main character? So Tashi, do you want to start?
Yeah, so for a show for two, I think I saw the character, like the idea of like what she wanted first and like what her dreams were and like what the obstacles were from her like being able to have those dreams. So in the show for two, like Mina wants to go to USC for like films and etc., like screenwriting, and like the obstacle was her parents. And so like that was like the first idea of her that was like in my head, and everything about like her character kind of formed around her wants and her desires and like kind of grew from there.
For When You Wish Upon a Lantern, the start of the book was actually the idea of the wishing lanterns. So this is something that is a very long-standing tradition in Taiwan. On Chinese New Year, thousands of people gather and they write their wishes on the side of a lantern and they all send them off at the same time. And just this idea of the sky being, you know, lit up with everyone's dreams and wishes was something that always stuck with me. And I knew I wanted to write something around that. And that was the image that first came to me. And then once I started thinking about this character who makes these wishes come true, then Leah's character started to develop. And, you know, she needed to be someone who's very earnest, who has a deep love for her community. So the book has a very tight-knit Chinatown community, and she, you know, really just wants to help the wishes come true for the others in her neighborhood. And the more I thought about it, you know, she is so into focusing on other people's dreams. And her biggest problem became that she didn't know how to make her own dreams come true. And I feel like that is such a universal problem. You know, figuring out what you want is already so hard enough, but then actually making that happen is so much harder. And, you know, for someone who even does this almost professionally for other people, you know, she still doesn't know how to turn around and do that for herself. And so that's really how her character came about. And that's her journey throughout this book.
I always, when I'm writing a book, I always start with the character. And so if I can see like where they're starting and then where I want them to end, you know, at the end of the story, I know that's like, I have a novel or I have a book. And when I was thinking about Tokyo Ever After and Tokyo Dreaming, I first envisioned a girl that was like myself in many ways, that she grew up in a mostly white suburban community and had never really felt like she was Japanese or white enough or American enough. And so that is really what Izumi's whole journey is when she finds out that she's a princess of Japan, is reconciling her Japanese American identity.
Yeah, for You Don't Have a Shot, it was kind of a funny process because I started off where I just wanted to write like a gay soccer book. And so I like that was the initial part of the story, and building the characters came from there, which is never how I usually create stories. But the day that I sort of tweeted about this, and then people were like, you should actually do it. I wrote like 3 very messy pages, and Tashi actually received these pages, and they're still, it's almost still identically like the first chapter of the book, which is really funny. But within those 3 pages, like Valentina sort of came to me very fully formed, which again does not normally happen. But within those 3 pages, I had established like she was a really competitive soccer player. She had a like tumultuous relationship with her father. She had a longtime rival with another girl. She was very anxious, and she doesn't like to show people her emotions. And so I'd sort of established everything very immediately for her, which I don't think that's ever going to happen again with the story. But it was just really interesting to me that she had come so immediately fully formed, especially because, as we may discuss later, like having this be my sophomore book, it wasn't the second book I'd ever written, but it was the second book after like my debut novel having been written. So it was really interesting to like connect with a character that quickly after fearing that that wouldn't happen. But yeah, all of her conflict and her baggage sort of came quickly, and everything I had to sort of develop and make more nuanced from there.
Yeah, it's like I love it because I was obsessed, I think, when I was younger with like Bend It Like Beckham, but didn't really necessarily understand the like hyped allure of Jonathan Rhys Meyers or whatever his name is. And was like perplexed, honestly, many questions while watching that movie. But I love what you said. I think it's such a great segue into the question actually that I was going to ask next, which is, did you learn anything unexpected while writing these books? Because this is not a debut panel. I do a lot of those, but this is not a debut panel. So I want to know if there was any unexpected things you learned, or also unexpected challenges as well, maybe. So Raquel, do you want to start? Because you were just saying that.
Yeah, I think I got to kind of avoid a lot of sophomore slump stuff because I sold my debut novel 2 years out from publication, and then I sold You Don't Have a Shot a year after that. So Ophelia hadn't come out yet when I sold You Don't Have a Shot, so I didn't have like a lot of the added pressure that comes with the once you know what it's like for your book to come out and people have expectations. So most of You Don't Have a Shot was written before I knew what it was like to have a book out in the world. But I had still struggled with writing another book after I'd written Ophelia after all. And so it was a fear of mine that I was not going to connect with a character the way I had with Ophelia, because that was my main difficulty with writing other books. And so when I connected with Valentina so quickly, it was quite a surprise, but it was also a very nice thing to learn. Like, okay, cool, I can still do this. Like it wasn't a one and done thing where that wasn't the only character I'm ever going to connect to, especially because Valentina is very different than I am. And so it was a fun lesson to sort of explore a character that I didn't have similarities to, especially because so much of her character revolves around soccer. And I grew up playing soccer, but I'm like the opposite of her. I was not competitive. She would have hated being on a team with me. And so getting to write a character that probably would have like bullied me as a child, or like that would have been more of an enemy of mine as a kid, was a fun exercise in like empathy and also character development, because I couldn't rely solely on like what I had been through. I had to imagine what a character who was very different than me, what her motivations would be. So a lot of my like weird lessons of sophomore writing was how to like build a character that wasn't so based in things that I had personally experienced and gone through. And that was just a very fun thing to get to do.
Yeah, for me, writing my sophomore book kind of felt easier than writing my like debut, but my third book has been harder. So I don't think it's like straight line of like progress. But I feel like one of the things that I struggled with my sophomore book was that I wrote it during the pandemic, and my book is set like in New York, and it's like the main character is like taking the love interest like all around New York, and like I was like, I'm gonna have to Google Maps this. Like I've never like I live in New York, but like there were like places that they were going that I haven't been, and I was like, I can't leave my house. Like this, so that was like a little bit of a struggle. Like I literally did go on like Google Earth for like several things to be like, how many steps would that take? Like, is this walkable? Like, what is the vibe? So I feel like being like in a situation where we were writing books like in the pandemic and stuff was definitely like an unexpected challenge to like already being like at that point like a debut author, because like right, like Rocky was saying, like at that point when I was writing a show for two, Counting Down with You hadn't come out yet, so it was still like all like very like, oh my god, like what are any of us doing here? So I feel like that was one of the challenges that I did not expect.
When You Wish Upon a Lantern was also written during the pandemic, and that did affect even just the idea of it, where I came up with the idea, I think it was, October 2020, and I needed to remind myself that there was good in the world, there was hope. And so I tried to write a book that would make me feel that. And that ended up being a little bit of the unexpected part of it, which is that I did feel a little bit of the magic that I was trying to capture while I was writing it. And I think that also was so new to me because my first three books, I really put in a lot of my struggles, my personal struggles into it. And there were many days of writing where, it was facing all my, skeletons and, dealing with all these horrible things that I hadn't really dealt with in my real life. And with When You Wish Upon a Lantern, while it does have pieces of me, I picked a lot of the joyful things. So this ended up being my love letter to my culture, and I picked my favorite holidays and traditions and food, and it was so different than before. My first three books were a little bit more about some of the tough parts I had about growing up, dealing with who I am and trying to figure out, being between two cultures, where I fit into all that. And this one, I got to write a girl who just, grew up knowing who she was, who loved this part of her, was in a very tight-knit, Asian American community where she felt like herself. And there was such a joy in that there is a part of me going forward that's like, can I do this every time? Because it was so much better to write, and it was just so much more fun to work on it. Not that the others weren't fun, and I did learn a lot about myself with the others, but with this one, there was just something that, brought such a happiness to my day that the others weren't able to do in the same way.
So Tokyo Dreaming is actually, it's my fourth young adult book. So I'm used to like the whole, like, do I have another story within me, and facing the blank page and like figuring out what the next book, the next story is. So I'm kind of used to all of that, that little slump or whatever before you start a new book. But I'd never written a sequel before. And that was really, really challenging. And it was also during the pandemic. So before, when I wrote Tokyo Ever After was like on the cusp of the pandemic, and then I had to write Tokyo Dreaming during the pandemic. And it was difficult to find that kind of joy and light when it was so difficult, when it was so hard. And it ended up being really great because it did bring me out of that kind of doom and gloom of the pandemic. But and it was also really hard to figure out how to write the same characters and keep the heart and the humor, but make their journeys different and distinct. And, how do you continue growing your characters? So what's the next step of their journey? And so I really had to take a pause and figure that out, like where Azumi was going to go next and what her next challenge was going to be. And then also figure out how to end the duology in a really satisfying way, which is always so challenging because you want to give your characters and your readers the ending that they want and, have imagined and deserve.
Okay, I have two well, they're not unrelated. They're obviously very related. I have two unplanned side questions. The first is to Raquel. Which side character, though, like which soccer side character, though, do you think that is more related to like your soccer tendencies, your soccer aptitude, right? Like, because there are a lot of soccer side characters, obviously, in your book.
I've actually answered this, so it's good. I already had an answer. There's a character, Marley, in the book who she sort of has to switch positions at times, and she has been on a lot of teams where she has been sort of like the player that they just put in whatever position that they need filled because she's not very good. And it was fun writing her because she is a very like bright, sunshiny character, but also getting to have characters tell her like you have value here and you're important here. But she just like is happy to be there, and she shows up to the games with like glitter on her cheeks and her eyes and like has like ribbons in her hair. And I felt especially like her doing promotional stuff for You Don't Have a Shot because I bought so many like purple eye makeup products and I wanted to find like my old uniform and just get really dressed up and paint like earrings to match the cover. So she's probably the character that I relate to the most in regard to being because I also for years was on like really bad teams and then ended up on like a good team when I was a kid and suddenly was like, wait, I'm good at soccer. Like people think I'm good. And I feel like we had more comparable journeys with our relationships with soccer that way.
Okay, and my second unplanned question is for Tashi. Have you now since then gone to all of the places you had to Google Maps?
I haven't been to one of them because it's a cemetery, and I just have been like, it's okay. I'm okay. Like I get like for them it worked because it was like it's like for a photography competition, so the aesthetics are nice. But I'm like, damn, I probably should not be hanging out in a cemetery. So I haven't been to that one, but I have been to the rest now. So a win.
Not like a great, just like romantic picnicky spot. Definitely not the same vibes.
Yeah, no, I have had a picnic in one of the spots now, but not the cemetery.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask some questions that will pair some books together, maybe like talk about some other themes within the books. One of my first questions, which is about Tokyo Dreaming and A Chauffeur Too. So figuring out how to balance who we want to be and the expectations others have for our future, I think are both really large themes in your books. And I'm wondering if both of you could talk about the situation for your main character, for those who haven't read it, obviously. And also, how do both of your main characters approach what their parents want versus what they might want? So Amiko, do you want to start?
Sure. I keep trying to tap my picture to unmute and I have to like drift down here to unmute myself. Technology is hard sometimes. So in Tokyo Dreaming, Azumi is faced with like the decision between like duty and heart, essentially, which a lot of we've seen a lot of royals face, and it seems that plays out, I think, a lot in like the tabloids and everything. And so she has a lot of expectations placed upon her due to her new position as a princess of Japan. And there is already a path kind of laid out for her where she is supposed to go to this certain school and she's supposed to major in something. It can't be, and there's a lot of parameters around it. It can't be too political. It has to be something that's like kind of humanitarian. So she's really kind of boxed in. There's like, I think she describes it as like there's a conveyor belt for being like the right princess. And it also spills over into like her love life, like who she's dating, and she's supposed to be dating the right person and everything like that. And I think what she really comes down to is that there's not, it's not black and white. So there's not like, you can, you can have both. You can be a good, dutiful princess, and you can also follow your heart. And so she kind of, that's what she has to navigate, is these really narrow spaces, but also figuring out how to make choices and, maintain her own self-agency.
Yeah, so in A Chauffeur 2, Mina wants to, like I was saying before, she's like an aspiring screenwriter. She wants to go to USC, but her parents have basically been like, you're not going to USC, like pigs will fly before you go to USC, like that kind of thing. But there's a film competition in her school that like her school has never won. It's like a whole thing. She's the president of the film club, but they've never won in all the years she's been at school. And her parents are like, you know what? If you win that, sure, we'll pay for you to go to USC, as kind of like a fuck you, I guess, to be like, you'll never succeed in anything you do. So yeah. If you win this competition, like, sure, we'll pay for you to go to USC, as like a, like an insult to her abilities and her talents. And so she kind of spends the whole book being like, I have to win this like short film competition. Like, I don't care what I have to do. And it like leads to her like, isolating people and hurting people because she's so like focused on this dream of hers. But like, she also like feels like this desire to like prove her parents wrong and like show them like, like she can be more than what they think she is. And I feel like it's like throughout the book, she's like also struggling with her mental health and stuff like that. And it's like exacerbated by the way her parents treat her. So I feel like in general, like she's just like fighting for her life a little bit. But I feel like that's really normal for teenagers who are in like homes that, where they might have abusive parents, like whether emotionally or whatever. Like, and so like that was like kind of like the goal with like Mina, to like kind of show what that kind of experience can be like. And also that you can come out on the other side and maybe like things won't go exactly the way you want, but like, you make it. It's okay.
I remember when I heard about the premise for Tokyo Ever After and Tokyo Dreaming, and I was so happy. As a like adopted kid growing up in the US, I like always secretly thought that it would be so cool if I was like secretly, and I mean not royal. I think that's a little bit too ambitious for me, but like secretly someone else, but like someone else cool, like super cool. So I remember reading that and I was like, this feels like wish fulfillment, but also like I think maybe I'm okay not being a princess. Um, it might be a little bit too much for me. I want to talk as well about In You Don't Have a Shot and When You Wish Upon a Lantern. Both of your main characters know their way around feuds. There's like a lot of feuding, tension, rivalries, competition. So I want to know if both of you could talk about the inspiration behind your main characters and specifically that rivalry, and how was it to create your rivals as characters, like the push and the pull. And for both of you, right, there's a lot of history behind the feuds. So bringing sort of that character's sort of their backstory, their histories from off page to on page, right? Like tell us all about it. Gloria, do you want to start?
I had so much fun writing the feud and When You Wish Upon a Lantern. So it's not Leah and Kai that are feuding, it's their families. And so part of my inspiration was one of the folk tales that I bring to life in the book is the Cowherd and the Weaver Girl, which is one of China's 4 great folk tales. And it's similar to a Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers kind of story. And so I wanted to bring this to life also in their relationship and, have those parallels throughout the book. And it started partly just because they have neighboring shops. And I just imagined, the kinds of stuff that would come up, and even though they seem small, they really grow. So they first start arguing about trash because they share a dumpster in the alley, and the bakery, will throw out spoiled dough and then it rises and the dumpster exploded. And so they're fighting about all these seemingly silly things, but they grow into this really big feud. And I just felt like that was a very real thing, right? These small kinds of things that really grow and take on all this history. And Kai's father especially is quite the character. And so I had a lot of fun kind of, playing into that, where he does this thing where he ends up with, thousands of these fish vests that he can't sell. And so, he's trying to pawn them off on the other shop. And just, I had so much fun with this like ridiculous history of all these things that they do. And the real reason was I wanted to give Leah and Kai another obstacle that they had to go through. And for them, they both are, Leah especially is very devoted to her family, but they're going through a very difficult time. Her grandma has passed away. She doesn't know who she is in light of this, because her grandma was really more her parental figure. And so she has lost the ability to communicate with her parents. And then Kai just has a very difficult relationship with his father and brother to begin with. And so for them to kind of overcome this, to be able to be together, is really important in their own character growth, trying to figure out, who they are with their families, and how do I talk to them, really.
Yeah, I also had a lot of fun with the rivalry. You get to do so much fun banter and just shenanigans when you have two characters that have some reason that there's like tension between them. And so, like I said, I knew I wanted to write like a sapphic soccer book, and Rivals to Lovers just sort of naturally lent itself to that, because like I made a lot of jokes about like the inherent homoeroticism of athletic rivalries, and yeah, stuff like Bend It Like Beckham or like She's the Man, different things that I watched growing up that dealt with sports and rivalries, just sort of infused into that. And I especially liked using that trope for Valentina and Leticia, because they're two characters that at the start of the book, when they're with each other in their rivalry, like explicitly, they're like, I'm better than you. They're very cocky. They're very conceited, and like, you suck, whatever. The dialogue is better than this. But, but implicitly, they are showing that they have some respect for each other, because you don't consider somebody who is not a threat to you a rival. Like if somebody is just in your way, that's just like a nuisance, whatever. But they're clearly rivals to each other, because they see the other one as having the ability to take them down, to beat their team, to be better player than they are, whatever. And so there's respect built into that. And I liked getting to play off of that, because these characters also both independently are struggling a lot with feeling like they're good people, feeling like they're good players, just really having issues with like self-confidence. And so having somebody who simultaneously they can use to bounce off of, to be like, no, I'm better than you, to sort of build themselves up, but also having someone who does respect them in some regard and views them as a legitimate player, person, threat, whatever, is helpful for them. And then they have to form this sort of reluctant alliance, which is one of my favorite. I'm a friends to lovers stan, but my favorite version of it is like enemies to friends to lovers, or reluctant allies to friends to lovers. And so they have to form this allyship where they're co-captaining a team together, and they're helping train each other for different positions. And in doing so, they're spending a lot of time together in this sort of forced proximity. And because they're struggling so much, and they think, oh, she hates me, they're able to open up to each other about stuff that they can't with their friends or their family, because they both worry, if anyone gets to know me fully, they're not going to like what they see. And that's a fear for a lot of people. And I think the appeal of enemies to lovers or hate to love for a lot of people, because the idea that someone could see all of you and all your faults and flaws and still love you is very appealing. And so they are able to bond with each other and build this safe space together, because they quite literally say, like, you already hate me. There is no risk here in you knowing the ways in which I've messed up and the things that I'm ashamed of and embarrassed of. Because if you still hate me, nothing has changed. But ironically, that's the thing that allows them to build and grow together, because they provide that for one another, and there's this sort of openness that they're able to share. And so it was really fun to get to do both, with playing off of the rivalry, one, having them sort of, shit talk each other and banter and make fun of each other, but also get to use that structure of like respect that is built there, and the lack of risk in opening up to someone who dislikes you to form intimacy was really fun. And then also maintaining the bantering structure that they have once they're in a place where they like each other, and getting to playing around with maintaining that dynamic while still making it no longer be about like you suck, and instead using sort of like reverse psychology on each other, or like being sort of sarcastic about like, oh yeah, well clearly you're a terrible player and that's why I care so much about like beating you. Was just a lot of fun. So yeah, Rivals to Lovers is honestly so much fun to get to mess around with. There's so much to play around with that trope.
I just wanted to remind people that if they have questions, you can drop them in the chat. I'm going to go to one of the questions and like pop back and forth. So one of the things, or one of the questions that people or someone had was, which is also a question that I would like to know about, which is anything on the books you're working on next, or like your next upcoming book. I think everyone's already like hungry for more, basically. Gloria, do you want to start?
I am working on things, but unfortunately, I can't share too much about them. So I'm not the greatest person to start with, but I'm hoping I'll be able to announce more soon. So stay tuned.
Yeah, so I have an adult thriller coming out next year called The Return of Ellie Black, which is about, it centers around a Japanese American detective and a girl that goes missing in the case. But in terms of young adult fiction, I have something coming out in 2025. It's called Love Me Tomorrow. It's about a Japanese American teen who doesn't believe in love and begins to receive love letters from her future love. So yeah, that's almost done.
I just did the cover reveal for my third book that comes out next year, called This Is Me Trying. And it is a YA contemporary. This is where I got to be my friends to lovers stan. It is about two estranged childhood best friends, sort of reconnecting over their senior year, 2 years after their mutual friend's death by suicide. And so it's a book that deals a lot with grief. It's heavier than my first two books, but it's also a book I had been trying to write since I was like 14. So at the current moment, it's been a decade in the making. And I really love it. It's the book that I'm the most proud of. It's the first time I got to do like dual POV, so that was a fun challenge, craft wise. But yeah, so, and there is, I have a lot of Ophelia After All Easter eggs, and You Don't Have a Shot. I learned my lesson from that because they're all vague and niche, and nobody can find them. Nobody has ever found all of them. So I only have one You Don't Have a Shot Easter egg, and This Is Me Trying, but I'm still establishing that. So that's what I have coming up next.
Yeah, my next book is another YA contemporary called Stay With My Heart, and it's coming out next year, and it's about a girl who aspires to work in the music industry who accidentally sabotages a local band, and then while trying to make up for her mistake, falls in love with the lead guitarist.
I did think of something, if I could just add. I do have an anthology story coming out in the next Star Wars from a certain point of view. So for the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary, they got some authors to write from the points of view of side characters. So we're retelling the movie, but from the points of view of a lot of the characters that you didn't get to see. So that'll be out in September.
Yay. I'm glad that everyone would share. I hope that people are taking notes. I forgot to take notes. Normally I do, but I forgot to put them in the chat. So I hope people were paying attention. I want to ask if your main character had a bookish best friend from another book, who would it be? And then also like my side sort of like tangentially related question is, what book from our world would your main characters love to read? Emiko, do you want to start?
I feel like I have like the easiest and most obvious answer. So mine would be Mia Thermopolis from The Princess Diaries, and that would also be the same book. I think Azumi would, they'd have a lot to talk about, and Azumi would benefit a lot from that knowledge.
Well, it sucks because she's not going to be here to hear my answer, but I would say that Mina from A Show for Two by Tashi, well, now she's back. I think that Valentina would get along really well with Mina from A Show for Two because I think that they share similar struggles with having not great parental figures, and then kind of expectations. And they're also kind of like bitey girls, like they're kind of little gremlins at times because of the trauma that they've been through. So I think that they could get along well and understand each other in that way. And then the book that I think Valentina would enjoy reading, which maybe it's just because it's having its sort of heyday on Twitter right now, is This Is How You Lose the Time War. I think would be really great because it is a sapphic enemies to lovers like science fiction story, and the two women in it are named Red and Blue, and Valentina and Leticia, their conjoined team that they're on together is purple, but their independent teams, Valentina's is blue and Leticia's is red, which there's a lot of really subtle color theory stuff going on there with and so I think that would be really funny and amusing for her to get to read a book that sort of similar implications to her own romance with Leticia.
Should I go? Sorry, I should have gone first. So Raquel, that Tashi could have heard your answer. Because my person is here, I was going to say that Leah would really want to be Izumi's friend because, I mean, I want to be in that friend group. Emiko writes the best friendships. But the problem would be that Leah wouldn't know how to go after it. I think she'd be way too shy to actually make the move. But she would also love her books as well. I think she would also love Samira Ahmed's books. And Samira and I are friends, and our first books came out within a month of each other. And we always used to joke that for our debuts, you know, our main characters would be best friends if they were in real life.
So true. I'm sorry, I cut out before, but I was saying that I think that Emmett would be best friends with Orion from Foul Lady Fortune. I think that they are very chaotic, flirty annoyances to their respective love interests. So I think that they would get along great. And I think the tangential question was, what kind of books would they like to read? And I think Mina would love to read Daisy Jones and the Six, or anything that has any kind of like TV or film adaptation, just so she could be like really nitpicky about it. Because I think that's exactly what she would do as a screenwriter.
Tasha, you missed me saying that Valentina would be friends with Mina.
They would be great, and they would be besties, and they would also be so mean, and it would be fantastic.
That's what I said.
So mean. It'd be great.
Okay, I have a question that I was unplanned question, which I was just thinking about, you know, while I was listening to. But I think that I think it relates to something that Tashi was saying, and also something that I was hearing or thinking about in You Don't Have a Shot, and also in everyone else's books, but about how the road to personal character growth can often have unintended character hurts. Like, I didn't really know how to describe character hurts, but you know, like side characters that kind of get pulled into the fray sometimes. I think that, you know, humans essentially probably, you know, are very self-absorbed, right? And so when we're on our own journey, we can often have people that we don't intend on hurting, but end up doing so, you know, with our actions. So I wanted to know, how do your main characters see the path to the future and the side characters around them? All of these sort of, you know, people and relationships that are, you know, means to an ends, or friendships or family, right? All of these side characters within like their own sort of path. How do they see them? So Tashi, do you want to start?
Yeah, so Mina has a lot of problems with a lot of people, but the one I'll focus on is her relationship with her younger sister, Anam. And so essentially, her and Anam are hello. Is it still my turn?
Wait, I just unmuted. Yes, it's still your turn. Sorry.
Sorry about that. The technical difficulties are really coming for me. But I was saying that I wanted to focus on Mina's relationship with her younger sister Anam, who's only 1 year younger. But so they are essentially going through very similar things, But the thing is that Mina's trying to go to USC California, even though she lives in New York, and her and Anam are like kind of in a fight that Mina doesn't realize is a fight, because Mina's so focused on going to USC and leaving and going to California, but her younger sister kind of sees it as like a betrayal to some degree, because she's like, how are you going to leave me in this house with our parents that we both hate? Like, how are you just going to go and you don't even think about the fact that like I would still be stuck here? And like Mina's so like focused on this goal of getting out that it doesn't even occur to her that she would be leaving behind someone in the aftermath. And that's like a struggle that she goes throughout the book, where Anam is like, oh, so you're just gonna go to California? And it's like, you know, she's making these like passive aggressive remarks that like Mina's just not catching, because she's so focused on her goal, and it eventually blows up naturally. But I thought it was really fun to write like sister relationship like that, especially one so close in age, because me and like my one sibling were also pretty close in age. And so I just like the idea that like two people could be living like living in the same home, but like not be able to fully understand like why the other person is doing what they're doing. And like Mina doesn't understand why Anam is mad, Anam doesn't understand why Mina would go. And so like there were definitely character hurts there.
And When You Wish Upon a Lantern, Leah and Kai definitely hurt each other unintentionally in their kind of progression to figuring out what they mean to each other. As for the other side characters, this was actually a unique one where Leah and Kai were helping all of them, right? They were granting all their wishes and they were trying to help them. And then in turn, they ended up helping Leah back as well. And one of my favorite characters to write is her friend Stephanie, who at the start of the book, Leah has kind of been staying away from her, because in 5th grade, they had this incident where the teacher had said something to the class about how Stephanie Lee had been stung by a bee. And Leah started clapping because she misheard and she thought that the teacher had said that she won a spelling bee. And then it turns out that Stephanie is deathly allergic, and the end of the story was she had to go to the hospital, and everybody was staring at her, and so she just assumed that everybody hated her, including Stephanie, because she made this mistake. And this little moment really defined a lot of things for Leah, where after that she was so scared to be herself in public. She was scared of making this mistake again. And partway through the book, she realizes that Stephanie hadn't even heard the story. She didn't care. And even after she heard it, she laughed about it. And it made her realize, why have I been caring so much about what other people think? I've changed how I behave, in life. And it turns out it wasn't even a thing. And that kind of starts making her rethink a lot of her past decisions. And then when she becomes friends with Stephanie is that friend that says whatever is on her mind, no matter what it is. And so Stephanie's the one who really pushes her into, starting to see Kai in a different light and admitting her crush. And one of her lines, which readers have pointed out to me as one that they like, is, she says, he's a cinnamon roll who can make cinnamon rolls, because he's a baker. And that's, and then that's the first time Leah kind of opens up and starts saying, like, I know, like, he's so cute. And they kind of have a heart to heart. And another side character that I love to write that also helped Leah a lot is her name's Shu Nai Nai, and she's an elder in the community. And I loved writing this multi-generational friendship, because Shu Nai Nai was able to say things to her like, when you get old, things like that don't matter. You get over things like that. And so she was able to give her a different perspective. And she again pushes her and says, like, why aren't you doing anything about what you want? And Leah really needs these other people in her life pushing her toward trying to make her own dreams come true.
Yeah, I think especially in Tokyo Dreaming, Izumi definitely has tunnel vision, where she's very focused on herself and the pressure and stress that she's under. And so because of that, she doesn't see that her own mom is kind of deteriorating, and she doesn't see that her friendships in the United States are also deteriorating. And that, that's part of it. All comes to a crisis towards the end of the book. And it also helps kind of develop her own awareness of the world around her too, and kind of help cement that you have a duty to yourself, but you also have a duty to people and to the world, to be like a good person and to be caring and kind. And so I think it all really dovetailed nicely, thematically with the book about her choice between duty and heart. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah, there are a lot of side characters in You Don't Have a Shot because there are soccer teams, and I knew if I wanted to explore like the found family dynamic and like everyone matters on a team, I couldn't just like not name everyone. I had to at least give everyone some type of presence on the page. But most of the side characters in Valentina's life at some point are kind of a victim to the way that she treats people. And this was very intentional because I wanted her to recognize throughout the story that the way that she is treating other people is very comparable to the way that her father treats her. And she has moments at times where she recognizes, like, this doesn't make me feel any better. Like, in momentarily she'll lash out, or she'll point out people's flaws, or she'll really take out her anger on them and her frustration with the way that her dad's treating her. And then she's like, I feel like him. I don't feel good about myself. And so her sort of character hurts throughout the story are that a lot of people become collateral damage in her trying to process this relationship she has with her father in the way that she has been a victim of emotional abuse from a parent. But she has one of my favorite parts of the book that I used to cry every time I got to this part is she also has a younger brother who's only about 2 years apart from her. And they start off with kind of a difficult relationship, but throughout the book recognize that the other one is going through similar things and can be more of an ally in their house versus someone that they kind of compare who has it worse to. And he says to her at one point, like, you don't have to be like our dad, basically. Like, if you don't want to, you clearly show regret, you show remorse. And she has to recognize that, like, she can't control whether her dad decides to grow and change as a person, but she can, utilize some self-control or some, growth in trying to break this cycle and not perpetuate it to other people. And recognizing that she has been treating people that same way makes her feel really bad, but it's also a wake-up call that she needs. So it was difficult at times because I knew that people would not always love her as a character because she is doing this to people. But I also felt like in order to depict this realistically and also empathetically, I needed to show that she is a flawed character at times, but also demonstrate that she does feel remorse and that she tries to make amends with the people around her. And she knows that people don't need to forgive me. That's not the point here. The point is apologizing and trying to do better. So that was really like the main component of her character growth, is that she causes a lot of character hurts along the way and has to reconcile with that and find a way to change that behavior.
Okay, I want to ask my favorite question, or one of my favorite questions, but it's one that I think about a lot, and it's about recharging your creative battery. I think that this is something a lot of people are struggling with. It's something that I'm struggling with. So I would like to crowdsource answers from everyone else. Gloria, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. Especially, I feel like, in publishing, I feel all this pressure, right? Like, there's wait times, and you feel like you have to be the one to constantly be creating things, because that's the only thing you have control over. And I think the first thing is you really have to remember to be kind to yourself. It's okay to take a break. You have to listen to what you need. And, I think the best work comes, sometimes you do need to take a break. You need to put it aside and then you come back to it. For me personally, I think, looking at other things helps, reading other books, watching movies, watching TV shows, especially, I think, because at least it's a different medium, but, it's still about stories. And it doesn't even have to be related, but just doing something else and turning your brain off. A lot of times you get ideas for your own things, even if it's so tangentially, it's like 10 steps away from what you're actually watching, but, it'll still spark something. And then I think finding a hobby is really helpful. I got really into curling a few years ago, and my husband and I actually compete at a semi-professional level now. And so during the winter, like, we practice a lot, and I've noticed, some days you're just, something's on your mind, or you've had a bad day, or you're having a hard time you're struggling with your story. But for me, when it's practice time, I'm on the ice, like, I put everything else away. I don't think about anything else. And it's just nice to be able to kind of switch gears. And then when I come back, everything looks so different. So just finding something else. I think it's good to have both a creative, outlet that you can turn to, but also just something completely different that you're not even thinking about it at all.
I think taking like really long breaks is a good recharge for me. I will usually go for walks like during the day, which helps me kind of like clarify my thoughts. I also don't work like over the weekends, aside from doing this very lovely panel. I tend to like close my office door and leave the work for Monday through Friday. Reading other people's books is really inspiring to me and helps to kind of recharge that creative battery. And yeah, I think it's one of the best things you can do, like Gloria was saying also, is having like other outlets too. Like publishing is a small world, and it can become like your whole world very easily. And so you really have to kind of go back out into the much bigger world. And I think that also helps to kind of recharge your creative battery, because when you see what's out in the real world, it lends itself easily to stories that you might want to tell.
Yeah, it might sound redundant because I agree with a lot of the stuff that Gloria and Miko said, that for me, when I was getting close to like starting to query, I was still a college student, and I was also very involved in the online book community. So I was like getting my degree in English, trying to become a professional author, and also reading and talking about books all the time. And so one of the best things I did for myself early on was getting a hobby that I could be really bad at, and that there was like no consequences to being awful at it. So I started teaching myself to play ukulele upside down. The upside down part was just a consequence of like me being, I'm right-handed, but I wanted to play left-handed. It doesn't make sense, but I was like very bad at it, and I still am not very good at it. And that sort of sparked me doing other stuff where like I'm not great at certain things, but I enjoy doing them. And the understanding that like I can have creative pursuits and hobbies and interests that I can be bad at with no consequence. There's no connection to my livelihood or my career. And if I'm bad, it can be in the privacy of my own home, and no one needs to be involved with it, was very helpful for me with like reminding myself I could have joy and creativity outside of my career. But yeah, also sometimes just getting away from everything. Like when I talk to my friends who are not involved in publishing at all and don't understand any of the language of the publishing world, it reminds me like I exist outside of this sphere, and that there are things in the world outside of this. But yeah, and reading other people's books, music is a really big thing for me. And even weirdly enough, writing when I know it's not something that I'm ever going to publish. Like I remember a lot of my dreams, and so sometimes I like write down my dreams and try to write it in like a story, like fictionalized way. And it's just a fun exercise for me, and a reminder that writing can still matter for me outside of like when I'm making money from it. That it's still something that I care about doing for me and me alone.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone said, especially like the consuming other media thing. But for me, for like books specifically, like writing wise, I find it very helpful to like reread whatever I've already written if I have written something. And if I haven't actually written in the draft yet, to reread like the initial like pitch or like synopsis or like whatever was like the first sparks of the idea that made me excited about the idea. And I feel like that usually helps me with like getting back on track for that like specific project or whatever, because I remember like why I was initially so excited to start writing it and why I like loved it so much and like why I had the idea in the first place. So I feel like specifically for like writing projects, like that's what I found to be helpful for like getting rid of like writer's block and like restarting like the creative process.
Yeah, I think that a term that was discussed, I think yesterday in one of yesterday's panel, was joyful procrastination. So that is my one tip, right? To like, if you're gonna do something else to refill it, like be joyful about it. Don't feel guilty, which is like so easy to say. But anyway, thank you all so much. I've left everyone's links to their books down below. So please, you know what to do, add them and order them and do all the beautiful things. Thank you all to the authors for joining me and chatting about these amazing books that are perfect for summer. And I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. Bye.